We're right in the heart of what was the commercial and financial center of the city back in the early 20th century, 100 years ago. You have what was Lloyd's Bank over there. This was Standard and Chartered Bank in the 1920s and 30s. You have the Customs House over here, and this building over here was the Accountant General's office. It was the government's finance department. And you see part of that wall has come down, and that was direct bomb damage from the Christmas Japanese bombing in 1941.
Really? Still?
Still. A lot of these buildings are only partially used. They're almost all government-owned buildings, but because the government moved to the new capital, many of these are underused. So part of our challenge is trying to work with government and the public in seeing what kind of reuse for some of these buildings might be possible.
And the idea is to turn this area into what?
I mean, this whole area, maybe a square mile around here, is our main conservation area, and we want to keep this a mixed use, mixed income, multicultural area where some of these streets will still remain big government buildings, but there are other very small residential streets with very intact, very old communities off these bigger streets that we want to keep as protected as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the fear is some of them would be kicked out once the rents go up. You beautify the buildings and they wouldn't be able to afford it.
No, eventually gentrification or the impact of that might be a challenge like anywhere else in the world. But for now, that's not the big problem. I mean, right now there's no gentrification going on. No one's putting money into these buildings. A lot of the incentives work in the other direction. So I think...
You mean to tear them down?
To tear them down and replace them with just very cheap new buildings.
So this is an example of what you don't want to happen.
Exactly. There was a beautiful old building here. It was pulled down a few years ago. And then we get this new building that really obviously has no harmony with the rest of the landscape. And this building over here is the Balthazar building. It was built by a very prominent Armenian family.
How long has the building been in this condition?
I guess for at least 30, 40 years it hasn't really received any attention, and there hasn't been any repairs. So you have this kind of dystopian world here.
Oh, wow.
And this is really a building that people shouldn't be living in. This is the Sofair building, which was built by a very prominent Burmese Jewish family in, I think, 1906. They sold it to an Indian family in the 1920s. This was in its...
This tells you something about how cosmopolitan the city was. Different ethnic groups, religious groups.
Absolutely. I mean, downstairs used to be the Vienna Cafe, which served the Prince of Wales in 1928.
Really?
There was a German photography studio, a Japanese hair salon. So in a way, it's always been a microcosm of the cosmopolitan nature of this city, and we're very keen to see it renovated properly, but we also want to make sure that the right thing is done for the very poor families who live in part of the upstairs. This is still a very pristine early 20th century environment. There's no urban landscape like this left anywhere in the world. This is the landscape of a small early 20th century Asian city. It doesn't exist in Jakarta and Bangkok or anywhere else, and that's why we're so keen to both give people a sense of the value of this going forward and also to do the right thing by the local communities who are living around.